When I first saw the trailer for the show, my first thought for it was simply just mid. Well, not even mid, it just looked bad. The animation looked bad, the humor just felt lame, and the concept just felt like whatever. And I had like absolutely no hope for this show being good. But that's very similar to the opinion I had for X-Men 97. And just like X-Men 97, this show right here actually blew my expectations out of the water.
So what exactly is Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man? Well, it's this animated show for all ages that takes place in an alternate timeline to the MCU. And you think that that concept would kind of be a turnoff to like a lot of fans, but at the same time, it actually does very well at bringing in people who like the MCU and like Tom Holland's performance and his entire character, while also giving us something different for people who don't care so much for the MCU. It somehow finds this perfect gray space to not alienate anyone who watches this, while also giving the show a chance to be completely original compared to anything we've ever seen from Spider-Man before. And that originality is such a big thing for this show because like he has a different love interest in Pearl. He has a different man in the chair, which is in Harry, and he also has a different best friend in Nico from the Runaways. And he has a different mentor, and that mentor being one of his greatest enemies in all of Spider-Man history. But I'm probably getting a little bit ahead of myself. I also want to talk about like the actual plot of all this. And the origins of Spider-Man are completely different here. Like the only reason he gets bitten by the spider is because of some crazy magical event that happens because of Doctor Strange. And in that same day, he also meets Nico Minoru, who is basically also known as Sister Grimm, and she's a part of the Runaways. I don't know too much about her. All I know is that this is before she's a hero, I think. Like she has like some magical abilities, kind of. I don't think she's really tapped into it, but there are basically a bunch of glimpses and foreshadowing to all of her magical past. And I'm also just now realizing that it's probably one of the reasons for why they have Doctor Strange in this, or maybe like vice versa for why they have Nico, because most likely in another season he's probably gonna like mentor her or something in magic. And that's pretty cool because of how down to earth he is. Anyway, he fights crime just like he does in the MCU. Like, do you remember that scene when like Tony first recruits Spider-Man and like he shows him the video of him stopping that like truck from hitting the bus? That scene is played out in this show like one for one. The only difference from the MCU and this is that instead of Tony Stark coming to recruit Spider-Man, it's actually Norman Osborn, aka the Green Goblin, Spider-Man's most deadliest villain. And the most craziest part of it all is the fact that he's black, which I actually think is really funny because I feel like the only reason they made him black was just because they wanted to make his waves make sense. And the show's entire premise is basically just like a what if scenario of if Spider-Man not only of course is just like recruited by Norman Osborn, but what if he's like essentially working for a big business, which is basically what happens in the MCU, but they actually question the morals of the situation in the show by not having simply just Tony Stark, where we're like, oh, it's Tony Stark, of course it's good. Like, no, we're just actually gonna replace it with any other billionaire and show that maybe this is not the best thing for Spider-Man to be working for them. And I think this entire concept is great. Again, not just because of the originality, but also because they do all this original stuff so well. And I want to talk about all these characters too. First off is Spider-Man, and he's similar to Tom Holland's version for obvious reasons. He's young, essentially starting high school within like the first episode, I think. He's overly awkward and is constantly making mistakes throughout the entire show, but he's still like a vibe, just like so many other characters within the series. He starts off the show being super grateful and heroic and kind. Like in the first episode, he ends up trying to protect someone else, even though he like could totally die in the situation. And this is like way before he gets powers, so it makes it feel like this version of Peter Parker definitely 100% deserved to get these powers over anyone else. This is a Spider-Man who's incredibly down to earth, which is one of the reasons for why this show is called Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. He starts the show by simply just stopping bike thieves and saving people from getting run over and whatnot. But then there's like also one episode where there's this one woman who steals money off of this pizza shop counter, and in that entire process, when he gets her back, and he basically has her basically to hand her over to police, he basically begs the guy who owns the store not to actually have this woman arrested because he understands that she didn't steal the money because she was evil. She was simply just down on her luck. She was desperate and she was just trying to survive, and in the process made a mistake. And Spider-Man understands that not every criminal needs to actually be punished or anything. They just need to be reformed. There's also another scene that shows this example of where like he's in the middle of a fight for his life, and in the process he's like trying to save a bunch of animals in this pet store, constantly trying to make sure none of them actually like die or get burnt or injured or anything. And I really like this entire arc that he goes on where he's just trying to come into his own. Like this entire time, Osborn is trying to force on Peter what he thinks Spider-Man should be, trying to like basically instill very important morals into Peter, but they're not morals that completely align with Spider-Man. There's this whole scene where Spider-Man almost dies and it's like his suit gets destroyed because he gets beat up. And because it's a suit that Osborn gave him, and because Spider-Man changes after this event, it feels almost as if like the idea that Osborn wanted him to be died in that moment, and he came into his own right after he came back with his own new morals and his own new suit, basically being the real Spider-Man. The only thing I really don't like about this Spider-Man is the fact that, just like the MCU version, this man does not give a fuck about keeping his secret identity actually a secret. Osborn figures out that Peter Parker is Spider-Man because he changed like in a stairwell and you didn't realize the camera was there. I just want to say, this scene's really weird to me because the camera only goes to Osborn, like it's his personal security camera, so no one else saw, which I think is like a really convenient plot point for Peter. So convenient that it's kind of stupid. But if you actually can turn off your brain for how like convenient that is, I will say that Norman finding out that Peter Parker is Spider-Man is definitely like the most interesting plot thread in this entire show.
The thing that makes Norman a really cool villain is the fact that he's not evil, or at the very least he's not evil yet. Now he does do some questionable things, and he pushes Peter into some like boxes that aren't fully supposed to be for him. But as soon as Norman realizes that it's wrong, he normally apologizes and he changes his entire attitude because he actually seems to genuinely care about Peter's well-being. Maybe even more than he cares about his own son, Harry. And that's because Harry is a complete doofus. Not like in the canon of the show, just more of my personal opinion. I do think he's being a doofus whenever he's not being the coolest guy in the room. I do like his whole entire lonely rich boy shtick. I think it complements very well with Nico's little lonely goth girl shtick. Somehow it actually like meshes really well because like she kind of hates him and he tries to prove herself. It's a cool storyline that within that entire section. She hates him because of the fact that he was born with this silver spoon in his mouth, but at the same time she also hates him even more because he's getting in between her and Peter. And this is actually really sad because it's an actual big insecurity of hers. Like her and Peter are essentially, they start off the show as like best friends, and more throughout the show because of Peter having to be Spider-Man, they get more and more distant until it essentially feels as if Peter is just leaving her behind. And this is like one of the only shows where like a character figures out the hero's secret identity and they genuinely like, when they feel hurt by not knowing the identity the entire time, I actually like felt sorry for her because like the writers were able to actually like let us know that this was already a very big insecurity of hers. So her feeling betrayed that she doesn't know his biggest secret is just like, it actually makes sense for once. Then there's Lonnie Lincoln, aka Tombstone, and he's very interesting for very similar reasons for why Osborn's interesting, and it's because he's also supposed to be a future villain for Spider-Man. But he starts off the entire series being a well-rounded dude. Like he's a star quarterback, he's got the girl, he's super friendly and like ride or die. Like he'll do anything for his family. Like he does stuff like where he takes classes to learn how to fix things so that his family doesn't have to pay someone else to do it. Or the time where he literally joins a gang in order to get his brother out of said gang. And that's a very big plot point, not only for this character, but for the entire show, to show that there are people that Spider-Man can't save by normal means. Everything that Lonnie is doing is so tense because at the same time, like he's risking and ruining his life at the same exact time, to the point where you just wish there was a way he could either fix things or get out of it, but it's just not that simple. The only thing I actually really hated about this section was the fact that there's way too many times where the gangs fight without any weapons. Like they all just throw hands in the middle of these knife fights, and it's weird because we see that the gangs have access to guns and they never use them. It's really odd. I feel like this makes the show more PG, but it also makes it look kind of stupid. It makes every single gang member seems kind of incompetent, except of course Scorpion, who decides to bring his tail to these fist fights. Regardless, his entire plot line actually goes pretty smoothly into Spider-Man's plot line in the end, and it culminates into this cool fight against Scorpion. And he's a pretty cool villain because he ends up being outrageously dangerous to everyone around him. And it's kind of funny too because it's not even like the final ending to the show. Like there's like an extra episode that has like this real final ending that has them fighting something completely different, and it just ups the stakes immediately. And that entire episode kind of just builds up the future seasons of what we're gonna see in the future. All in all, I think my final ratings for this show is an 8.5 out of 10. It has a super original Spider-Man origin while also still being MCU adjacent. Every single character is like an entertaining vibe, and I love keeping up with them within the story because all of their problems are so grounded and real and human, and those human problems keep me pretty invested. And the core themes that make Spider-Man Spider-Man are all front and center, and it's all very nice. The only reason why I don't give this a full 10 is because the animation is horrible. Just like how I said when I first watched this entire trailer for the show, I said, oh, this looks horrible. I could tell you, after watching the entirety of season 1, I can still very much say this shit looks horrible. But I do understand the entire vision for this show. The art style is supposed to mimic the Amazing Spider-Man, like the original comics from Steve Ditko. But doing it in 3D just does not work. It kind of reminds me when when Fortnite first started adding anime skins, and like you have skins like Goku who look like super derpy in like certain most angles. And it's the same in this show where a lot of the angles of these characters just look bad. It just looks very unappealing to look at. And that goes the same for a lot of the actual like fights and stuff, like just the actual rigs of the characters, how the characters move. It feels so stiff. When Spider-Man swings, it doesn't feel right. It feels lifeless. If you're looking for great animation, you're not gonna find it here. Besides that, I loved everything else. I loved the story, I loved the characters, I loved the themes, I loved everything else about this. And it's just the animation that just is a complete stinker. But that's really all I have to say. See ya.